Hello everyone. We'll be covering 1-point perspective, 2-point perspective, and 3-point perspective, and psiography. This in all would cover the understanding of how the 3D world works. Um, in the later classes, we will talk about buildings and we will make those buildings in one of these perspectives. Um in this tutorial, we will be working on basic shapes to get the idea in much more clarity. So, before starting off with 1 point and 2, 3 point perspectives, uh, let's understand what a horizon is. It's very crucial for understanding perspectives. So, a horizon is when you are looking towards one edge, wherever you're looking at. Um, there is a point where everything would meet, and that's always at the horizon. Now, if you're making from your own eyes whatever sketch you're making, this horizon would be your height. If your frame encompasses the whole of you, from your feet to your eyes, then the height of your horizon would be your own height. uh, it's fine if you don't get the concept right now, but it's just for the basic understanding. Uh, you, you can say that when you're looking forward, this single point is where everything would meet. uh, that's that's the basis of 1 point perspective, but in reality it's not exactly like that. In reality, there are 2 points where it meets. In fact, there is a point at the top as well where everything moves. Now, in case of the real world, these points act together to create what scene you are looking at. So let's say, okay, the first painting that you guys, that we all make, is this mountain and this river flowing towards you. This is the basic understanding of 1 point perspective. So let's say we will make uh, the basic shapes in all these 3 perspectives and try and understand where these things would work, when will come to use. Uh, this very scenario where there are mountains, sun, and this river flowing. Uh, it's very easy to make streetscapes. I've turned the river into a street. I forgot saying that. So this 1 point perspective is very good for and very useful in making streetscape when everything meets at one point. And so let's say if we break it down how it works, the vertical and the horizontal, these always remain perpendicular to each other. And the one that is the third axis, this one, it will always move towards one single point, wherever that is. So if these were to be converted to boxes, these would behave like this. So this is what is 1 point perspective. But as I told you, our eyes never works like that. When we look towards the horizon, there are actually 2 points that would be there. So when we were talking about the box, in 1 point perspective, this was moving towards a certain point. In 2 point perspective, this is not there. There are 2 points on two ends, and the horizontal axis, they move both. So like this one was moving towards this point, this one would move rather towards this. Now, as you can see in this very sketch, uh, this block has opened up like this. So such perspectives are very useful for making when you are making a particular building, a single building, not a streetscape. These are very useful. So 2-point perspectives are used in making a single building when the need arises. So this is the basis of 2-point perspective. In the 3-point perspective scenario, the vertical line also has a point. This is closer to what we understand about what we see. Um, so in a 3-point perspective, the same box, now you have, sorry, now you have 3 points, these two on the same line. Okay. Yeah, these two on the same line and one at the top. Let's keep it a little higher up because that's how it usually is for a building. Now if you have to make a box, there are these two, the horizontal lines will meet to two different points on the other ends, two opposite ends, and the vertical line will go towards this side, towards a point at the top. Now the vertical lines on the other ends will align to this line. So ultimately what you get as a box is this. So this is useful for making skyscrapers, as you can already see how it would end up looking. So if you're making something that's really tall, definitely it's not going to be, let's imagine Burj Al Khalifa, and towards the sky and keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller. 3-point perspective often used in making bird's eye or worm's eye view. Worm's eye view. Bird's eye view is when you look from the top, so that's not what is used. Worm's eye view, when you look from the ground and towards the top of a building. Uh, so these are the 3 different perspectives that would be used whenever you're making buildings, architectural sketches. Going a little beyond this, what in reality, if we see how the eye works, it is a 6-point perspective, which is actually one at the top, one at the bottom, one on either ends, one at the towards where you're looking at, and one behind your head, which you can't really make. So how do you make that? Well, everything starts and ends like this. This is beyond your course, so you can skip. So how do you make anything in this? Well, what happens is things in reality are never straight lines. Things in reality are actually slightly curved. This is a very exaggerated version of a fisheye. Nothing in reality even looks like this. It looks straighter, but they're never properly straight. So the 6-point perspective, it's always very difficult to make even a cube in 6-point perspective. But let's say we try making one. So the 2 ends of a cube would be this. The horizontal lines would be this. And the ones, let's say, so this is 6-point perspective for you. This is beyond your syllabus, no need to follow this. is just for your understanding how the perspectives keep getting denser and denser, and where it ends. It ends at almost 6-point perspective. There is not much beyond 6-point perspective that you need to understand. There is obviously a lot left to understand that you can understand when you actually join architecture. Okay, so that is for perspectives. Now we'll try and understand psiography. Now, how does shadow work? So we'll start with the cube. Cube is the easiest thing to understand. So let's make a 2-point perspective. Let's say something, the sun is putting some light on this, shining some light on this object. So what happens? So it is, first you have to understand where the ground is. When you're making the ground, just kind of make things in alignment to this. For a box, it's pretty easy. When you're making a sphere, you can obviously make a box outside and then align them. So that gives you an understanding where the shadow will be cast. So that floor you have to understand, you have to visualize, and that visualization, a help for that visualization would be the base. That gives you a good idea where the things would move. And obviously all the lines will move towards that same point where this is going to meet. Okay, so this is clear. Now casting the shadow. So the sunlight is coming like this. Now when it's touching this edge, it will cast a shadow over onto the floor. Now we can't really make sure where this edge would fall right away, but what we can do easily is we can try and understand where this point will be. Now obviously you need some visualization or imagination to understand where in a sketch these lines would end up touching the ground. But once you get clear about it, let's say the sun is over here, so it's almost right above the uh, face of this box, but at an angle. So this particular point might miss this whole thing, but it would cast a shadow beyond this point, like somewhere over here. So this point will come and meet over here rather. This area will be partly lit by the sunlight. This point will move and touch somewhere over here. And this point will touch somewhere over here. So when you connect these points together, you will see a area where no light is able to fall, because this face is blocking it completely. So this is basically the shadow of this object. Now if you move this sun slightly towards this side, then let's say from this point, this is little far high up, don't consider it at this exact point, it is just that you have moved towards this side. The angle of these lines would slightly vary. Now this variation will make these points fall a little away from where it was falling before. Now when that happens, this point now has a point which is away from this cube towards this side. Now it is possible for making this particular line over here, because this particular line, because we have marked this over here, this over here, so you can connect these two to get this edge over here. this particular line, that is, it will start from here and come and meet over here. This particular point, it will cast a shadow over here. So this line and this edge will start from here. So whatever area that is between these lines is the area where the shadow will be cast. This is fairly simple. If you try and do it yourself for a few times, you slowly get the hang of it. Um, this is more like 3D geometry, and would just need a little visualization or a little practice to get a clear understanding of it. You have to see a lot of objects in uh, things around you to get more used to it. Observe them, try to understand how they behave in light, um, uh, how the shadows are cast. If that helps, that should ideally help. But it's basically your imagination trying to understand how light would move, how shadows would be cast, where the points on the floor would be cast when an object is placed. Things get a little more complicated when it's a sphere. Because in a sphere, you can't really have this helping points. There are no points which exactly cast a shadow. What can do is you can make something like the horizon, something like the equator and the latitude, longitudes to give you a kind of idea of where it would be casting the shadow. So you can take help from this as the point where it would be cast. But it won't be of complete help. Spheres would need more visualization. The only thing that can help is, though a particular light is falling on this, you can understand where the top would move, where the top of a sphere would cast a shadow. You can visualize that. That kind of gives you the idea, the starting point, this, and the ending point, this. Now, if you have an understanding of the end of this equator, that will give you an idea of where this end of the equator would cast a shadow. Similarly, this equator would move back like this, and that the light behind would cast a shadow somewhere over here. So when you connect them all together, you have to understand it's all curved, so this will be curved too, but it will be passing through all these 4 points, and that will give you an idea of how the sphere would cast in shadow. Now there are some things to understand about sphere. Like there will be a base, there will be a lower latitude where this particular light coming from this point won't be able to pass. So this thing will also cast a shadow. So rather than, I'll make it in 2Ds for a clearer understanding. So let's say light is coming from over here. So this part is never going to get lit. This whole part is getting lit. This is in the darkness. This whole space. Now, if that's the case, then the shadow won't be cast starting from this point, which is over here. So this would be wrong. This would move a little backwards, the shadow. The shadow would be kind of like this, because the shadow over here, if you make it in side view, it's like this. Because this point might be inside might be the point that's touching, but it will stay inside the shadow, where the shadow actually would be cast at this point. So whenever you're making a sphere, like making a shadow of a sphere, remember some bit will, the point at the bottom, some bit will be inside the shadow. Never start your shadow from the point. Always keep that point inside the shadow. That is one basic thing you need to know about making shadows of spheres. Now, this is shadows. Let's tackle the simpler part, which is shades. How do you shade an object? What you need to simply understand is shade does not really work in whenever you're making a building. Shade works in a manner that it is easy for the shape to shadow always works in a manner that it's not in directly black and white. The shadow is slightly ambiguous. Shade is slightly ambiguous in the way it works. Now, what is ambiguity? Where is the ambiguity in this? Well, let's say if there's a light falling on this, until unless it's like the only source of light is not going to get reflected from anywhere, uh, it will never cast a shadow, a shade which is like this. Why so? Because light does not travel in a in the like it does not just move to from one side and fall on the ground. It reflects off the ground and reflects on the ground and touches back the same object again. And never will you find the shade of an object to be a straight line. It'll always start from a dark end and slowly move and become lighter. That is always how shade works. There'll always be a point, situations where the object is, let's say a cube. If the light's coming from here, there'll be one side which would be of a flat shade. The one on the other side won't be as dark as this. In real life, though, there could be situations when light is just not reflecting off the ground for some reason, and you get pitch black surfaces, both of them. It can happen, but rarely would it happen. It's when it does happen, life gets easier and you can make easy sketches. But in reality, in general cases, this will be the case. This will be the scenario. So the one which is least probable to get any sort of light will be darker, which is this face, because this face is away from any light possible source, and it's like against the light source, away from the light source completely. Whereas this one is slightly towards, so this will get some bit of shade and some bit of light, while the one with the top will get a lot of light, so that you can, in most cases, keep it shadeless. So Whereas in case of a cube, it is flat shades, two different flat shades. In case of a cone, it will be slowly graduating towards something lighter shades. Now, if you want to make something more realistic than this, let's just give you an understanding of sphere as well. In a sphere, it's usually it's a straight line, of course. If it's coming from wherever it's coming from, there will be a straight line that's perpendicular to that. You start shading from one end. In case of, I'll just, oh. In case of a sphere, it's important to understand that never will a sphere be directly facing towards you or away from you. So let's say there is a sphere and something is falling on this. So what I'm trying to explain is, when you're moving towards the other end like this, it won't go as a straight perpendicular thing till the end. It'll end, it might have something like this. It will be perpendicular to it, but this would be in the exact side view. In the exact, like, if you're looking from sideways, then only will you be able to see it as a straight line. If you are seeing it any other way, then you'll always see a shadow like this. This straight line is still perpendicular to the light coming from wherever it is coming from, but what you see is this side. And hence, when you are making it's also a good practice to make the shade right away from when you start like this. It'll be easier for you. So when you reach the equator of that sphere, or what you call the longitude or the meridian, you will have something, the shade would be something of a curve like this. The shade moves towards it like this and it ends like this. So this, at this particular line, it should merge completely. It should be faded to zero like this, the way it happened with the cone. So let's make one more. Now, in these cases, all these cases, as we spoke about how the shadows work, the same things can be applied onto this. The only thing is, you have to sync both the things, the shade and the shadow. Let's say for the cube, you can see this is totally away from as per the shade, so it's fine to say, and this one is not totally away but slightly away, so the light most probably is falling like this. In case of the cone, the light is going like this. Oh no, already made the light. Okay, fine. Yeah, take care. So and for the sphere, remember, slightly always before. It's never at this point. And this thing most probably will cast a shadow somewhere over here. This can go like this can go like this, and you have something like this. So yeah, I made a mistake. It should fall somewhere over here. One good thing to notice that if in a sphere the shadow gets elongated, it gets pointier. It gets elongated further, it gets pointier. The more closer it is, the more bulbous and curvy will it be, for obvious reasons. Hope I don't have to explain that. So that's this. That's all for this tutorial. Keep practicing these things. Make spheres and cones and cubes, quite a few of them. Try out the perspectives uh, and try out making those shadows. The more shadows you'll make, the more clarity you'll get on that, the better your sketches would be when you make the buildings. Uh, Shades and shadow and line thicknesses. These are the main things which guide how beautiful your sketch is going to look. Okay, so that's all for today.